just finished picking up a few little bits from one of the bee yards. I had moved some hives around the other day, and so I had some pallets that I needed to pick up. So I got those picked up, and I'll show you what we've done with a few of our nukes. We've kind of put them into a nuke stack, and it's going to be an interesting little bit. We're going to see how they overwinter that way. So it is a little bit later in the day, and we're just going to go walk over and take a look at some of the nukes that we stacked up on our little pallet. These are some of the nukes that we have stacked. Those guys are bearding quite a bit. So what we'll do, I know it looks like a bit of a mess right now. What we will do is I will actually top everything once everything gets finished clearing out their feeders. We'll top everything with styrofoam insulation. We'll strap everything down. There are a couple more nukes we need to add to this stack, and then they'll be ready for the winter. So one other thing that I thought would be good to show you guys about kind of what we did today without actually showing you while we were doing it. Out in the bee shed, the pollen patties that we put on. So we use a Pro Winter patty that is a pollen substitute, and we feed a small amount of it, and then we kind of watch based on the hive's performance as to how much pollen they've brought in and have in the hive available, but we feed a small portion of it to make sure that they have enough to bulk up for winter, essentially. It is a 50-pound tub of feed. We actually use this to bulk them up. It has sugar, it has protein, and this is what we feed right before fall. And we'll feed this again in very early spring too. Anyway, you can order this in a 50-pound pail. I think this is like a 3-pound bucket or 3-gallon bucket or something like that. I'm not quite sure, but it's 50 pounds weight-wise. And you can order it from Man Lake. It's affordable, and you can order it in smaller quantities. If you don't need 50 pounds, you can order it in smaller quantities. I will leave a link in the description below to this guy so you can go get it if you need it. The great thing about this is if we need to emergency feed, like if we have a colony that's not doing so hot, we can still use this as an emergency feed for sugar in the winter as well. So for the bit that I forgot is actually making the patties. What we do is we just take a scoop of that. We have a little scale that we use. We measure out a 1-pound portion. We sandwich that in between 2 pieces of wax paper, and then we kind of flatten it out into a pancake thickness and put that on top of the hives. This is what this one's actually a little bit over a pound, but this is what a pollen patty looks like once we get it made. We just scoop it out of that bucket, and then we make this. And so then for just 5-frame nukes, we would actually take that 1-pound patty, and depending on, you know, if it's a single stack, if it's a double stacked nuke, so if there are 2 boxes on it, then we would feed the whole 1-pound patty to them, but we would split it in half because it fits better. We cut the patty in half. We put half here and half back here, so that we can still have a feeder here in the middle, and they can get to it. If it's just a single, then we only use a half of the patty. Put on the hive, box it back up. We do the same thing for like a 10-frame. We just leave the whole pound on, put it on top of, this doesn't have any frames in it, but put it on top of the top bars, and then put the top back on, and we're good to go. Here are a few pro tips on things you could also do to make working with pollen patties a little bit easier. If you're going to be getting into your hive much after you put a pollen patty on it, they can get a little bit messy. So if you're, let me flip the camera around here. If you're working with a 5-frame nuke, let's just pretend that this is the size of your pollen patty. That's roughly what the size of one pollen patty that we would put in a 5-frame nuke would be. I don't have a pollen patty right now, so I'm just using this as an example. So that would go on top of your top bars. A couple of things you can do. If you're working with a full-size hive and you happen to have a queen excluder, you can put a queen excluder down on top like this, and then put your pollen patty on top of that, and then anytime you need to get into your hive, you just have to take your queen excluder off, and your pollen patty or anything that's residue or wax paper all just stays up here on top. You can get rid of it, you can work your hive, no mess. The other thing you can do, if you have some 1/2-inch wire mesh like this, which is we use for mouse guards during the fall, you could cut a size of this that would be big enough to put a pollen patty on. Set that underneath your pollen patty, and then the only thing you have to do is get rid of your wire. Now this adds a little bit of thickness in your on top of your frames here, but usually the pollen patty will mesh down around this pretty nicely. It just kind of gives it a little bit of a reinforcement, something that can be picked up and taken off the hive without leaving behind a huge amount of mess. Not necessary, nor is this necessary, but it is an option to make your life a little bit easier when you're working with them. If you're just going to be putting pollen patties on and you're not going to be getting in your hive and reworking them a lot, not necessary to worry about it at all. Just leave it on there and let them be. And then possibly the last thing to consider when you're putting pollen patties on is the thickness of the patty and the amount of space that you have on the top bars, between the top bars and the lid of your hive. For nukes and even for our tin frame boxes, the way that we cut these down, we actually do something in order to create a rim for these, so that if we need to put something on top that is too thick, we have a rim that we can put on here. So this rim is actually the remnant of a cut down box. So we actually build the whole box and then cut it down to its right dimensions. So we have this size of a rim that we can use to give us a little bit of extra headroom here to put a patty on and then our lid. Or we have an additional size, which is a much larger rim that you could actually put ventilation holes in if you wanted to, that we can fit on top. Gives us a lot more room, and we can then put on, our lid. That is something to consider. Pollen patties can get pretty thick sometimes if you don't have enough room between the frames and the top of the box, the top cover, to be able to put a pollen patty on there. Or if you need to create some room to put a winter feed block on there, like a sugar cake or something like that, then you may want to look at getting some type of a rim to add to the box so you have some additional room to work with. Those are pretty much all of our considerations when we're doing fall feeding, getting ready for winter. If you have any questions, comments, please leave them below. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and you can follow us on any of our social media. Links are down below in the description, as well as the link to the winter feed that we use. Thanks, guys. I will leave a link in the description